In Pasuk Hey, Yaakov says to Yosef, "Ato shnei vonecha nolodim lecho be'eretz Mitzrayim ad bo elecho Mitzrayim alihim." And now the two sons that were born to you in Egypt, in the land of Egypt, before I came to you, they are considered mine. What does it mean? They're considered mine. Ephraim, Menashe, Keruvim, Shimon, Yuli. Ephraim and Menashe will be the equivalent of Reuven and Shimon. They have the same status as two tribes. So we discussed yesterday, why do you have to give this introduction? The two sons that were born, we know this. Yaakov is here 17 years in Egypt. It's a known fact that when he came, Yosef had two sons. So why does he have to predicate that Ephraim and Menashe were born to Yosef before he arrived in Egypt? And therefore, Ephraim and Menashe are going to be the equivalent of Reuven and Shimon. So we explained yesterday that Yosef had the ability, as Yaakov raised 11 of his sons in Choron, despite the environment, despite the representation of evil there, his family was untouched by the environment, and he was able to raise those children who would be the future of the Jewish people, who could have that capacity and that qualification to receive the Torah at Sinai. Identically, Yosef having that special ability to contend with all these issues of exile and whatever that represents, Yosef was able also to create this insular environment to raise these two sons that they should be qualified to be the equivalent of Reuven and Shimon. That's the understanding. But what I want to point out, but factually speaking, when Yaakov passed away, as we said, Chazal, the moment Yaakov passes away, the effect of Egypt somehow begins creating some level at some degree of spiritual erosion, even though Yosef was alive. So even though Yosef was the equivalent of his father to contend with all the issues of Golus, but not quite. He wasn't quite at that level, because he would have been at that level. The bondage shouldn't have begun seeping in at any level until Yosef passes away. But it happened when Yaakov passed away. Nevertheless, Reuven and Shimon made the grade, Ephraim and Menashe made the grade that they were qualified to be established as tribes. That Ephraim and Menashe are the equivalent of Reuven and Shimon, despite the fact not being the equivalent of his father at the same level. However, he says, but any other children, if you should have other children after Ephraim and Menashe, they could be considered yours, meaning they're going to be considered grandchildren. They're not going to be considered the patriarchs of their tribe. They'll be considered under the guise of their brothers, meaning they'll be part of Ephraim and Menashe tribes, but they're not going to be independent tribes as Ephraim and Menashe are. Now, this is interesting. When Rachel passes away, although Rachel was the primary matriarch, she was not buried in Marsa Machpelah. Where was she buried? She was buried on the road, on the way to Beis Lechem. Now, and we discussed earlier, why was Rachel not buried together with Yaakov? So initially, when Yaakov first saw Rachel, it says he kisses her, and then he cries. Why did he cry? So one of the explanations which Rashi cites from the Midrash is because he had foreseen that Rachel will not be buried in the Marsa Machpelah together with him. That's one of the reasons why he cried. She's buried elsewhere, not there. And that caused him this pain, and therefore he cried. But the question is, why was she buried on the road? Why was she buried on the way to Beis Lechem? So over here, Yaakov is going to explain to his son why he made that choice and did not wait to take her all the way to the Marsa Machpelah, which he could have, because it wasn't that far, and it wouldn't have been, it was feasible to do, but yet he chose to bury her there. And he's going to explain that that's Rashi cites the Chazal. It was based on prophecy. Hashem says she should bury there, not in Mars Machpelah. Because when the Jews ultimately are going to go into exile, at the time of the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, Rachel will come out from her grave, and she will supplicate Hashem from high, and she will pray to Hashem that her children should return from exile. Rashi cites the pasuk, Kol Baram and Nishma. The voice will be heard from above, from high above, and Hashem says, and the children will return to their borders. That was essential. We needed her supplication for the Klal Yisrael to come back from Golus. That's why she had to be buried there. Because when they passed by her grave, she will come out with pain and supplicate Hashem, and Hashem will respond, they will come back. So, but this is the interesting thing. Ani b'voi Padna Aram. Meaning, when I was returning from Padna Aram, although I am burdening you and asking you to take me and bury me in Canaan, and that's something I did not do to your mother. She passed within the proximity of Beis Lechem. Kivras Eretz, Midas Eretz, Ve'malpayim Amo Kemidas Tchum Shabbos. And it wasn't that far. It was a short distance away. Lo Toma Sheikvu like Shomim, Lo Licho, Lo Kover Bechevron. And don't even think it's because it was the rainy season, and therefore due to the condition, the road conditions, I couldn't take her. Eis Grid Hoyo, Sha'oretz Chalum Kavora, it was time, it was packed because it was dry. Vek Barosham, Lo Lachtio, Afilu Beis Lechem, Lachnis Loretz. I didn't even take her to Beis Lechem, was on the way to Beis Lechem. I didn't bring her into the land. This is the point. And Yaakov says, all these years, I know you had a gripe against me. You had something in your heart which would a claim against me, avodah. But I want you to know, Shalpi Hadibo Kavarti Hashem, it was based on divine dictate. That's why she was buried there. Shnei Le'ezer L'baneo, that she should be Ezra, should be an assistance for her children. Sheigla Osam, the Vuzara Dadvayu, over him Derech Sham, when they were going to exile by Vuzar, who was a Babylonian general. Yotzes Rochel al Kivro, Bocha Bakeshes Aleim Rachmim. Rachel will come out of her grave and she'll cry and she'll supplicate Hashem for Rachmim. Shenemar quotes the pasuk in Yirmiyah, Kol Berom and Dishma, the voice, Beroma, high up was heard by Kodesh Baruch Hu Shiva, and Hashem responds to her supplication. The Pulosech Num Hashem, there will be reward for your action. And the children, the sons will return to their borders. Okay, that's why she was buried, through divine dictate. So I asked the question last year. If you remember the question, Ernie, Jay, if Yaakov knew all along that Yosef had this gripe against him, he says, I know in your heart you have a claim against me, but now I'm going to explain it to you. And if he knew Yosef was a very qualified, capable, smart person, he could have shared this with him years earlier. You'd say, maybe when he was 17, he wasn't mature enough to appreciate it. Comes to Egypt, Yosef is running the world. He's the viceroy of Egypt. He's sustaining and has responsibility to feed the world. He definitely had the capacity to appreciate this. But yet he waits right before he dies to share this piece of information with him. But in fact, it's bothering him. And he says, I know you have this claim against me. He should have explained it to him immediately. Why did he wait right before his passing to share this piece of information? That's the question. Vayar Yisrael is b'nei Yosef. Now again, it's not Yaakov. Again, we're switching from Yaakov to Yisrael. Yisrael sees the sons of Yosef. He hasn't yet given the blessing. He just made the statement, they're going to be Ephraim and Manasseh. He says, who are they? So Rashi says, why all of a sudden is he asking this question? All the years, I mean, who informed Yosef that his father was not well? It was Ephraim, because Ephraim all those years used to study with Yaakov. So all of a sudden now he said, who are they? So he's not asking that who are they? He doesn't recognize who they are. Evidently, he senses there's a problem in their pedigree. In who they are, there's a certain spiritual failing which will reflect into the future, which is to cause something in the future, which is a problem. Rashi, Yashus Bnei Yosef, Bikesh Levorcham, the Stalka Shchini Mimenu. He wanted to give them a bracha, and all of a sudden the divine presence actually left him. Lefisha Osid Yerovim Va'achov Lotzis Me'Ephraim. Because Yerovim ben Levot, which ultimately, what he had done led to the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. And Achov, who was one of the most evil kings, were going to come from Ephraim. This is after the kingdom was divided. The Yehu Bonav Menashe. These were evil people. So these people are ultimately going to be the Chil Hashem at the most advanced level. So evidently, where does it begin? It begins, it's rooted in the foundation of who they are. He says, evidently, this when they were conceived, there's some kind of deficiency, spiritual deficiency, and that's why they're not worthy of a bracha. He didn't understand, but there was some kind of reason why the Shekhinah had left him, and therefore he wasn't able to give the bracha. The Yom Yosef of Aviv Bonahim. Yosef said, my sons, Asher Nosa li Elokim Bozeh, which Elokim gave me Bozeh. What's Bozeh with this? Rashi Bozeh, Herelo Shtar Eris and Shtar Ksuba. He showed his father the document of betrothal and the document of the Ksuba, the marriage contract. Now, that was so now we understood. There was a reason we always see that whenever we come to a certain watershed moment, there's always a level of prosecution that doesn't allow it to happen. We're about to go into Eretz Yisrael. We have a story with the Meraglim. The Jews get this crazy idea. We want to send scouts. The 40th year, the whole generation passes away. What happens? Right away, they start complaining. Lechem achlokel. We had enough of this wafer bread. We want to eat real food. You're about to, and this is the new generation. And they saw whatever transpired up to this point. Where do they get this crazy idea now? All of a sudden, Hashem sends vipers to bite them. And Moshe has to make a copper snake and so on and so forth. Always, whenever we're transitioning to another level, there's always what we call kitrug. There's always a level of what? Of prosecution, not to allow it to happen. Chizkiyahu Melchi was supposed to be Mashiach. What happens? The Midas Adin comes, says, he quite doesn't make the grade. Doesn't make it. What did he say, Halil? Midas Arachman says he should be. There's always something at the last moment. Here, they're assuming the status of tribes. So it's a new profile. It's a new dimension within Klal Yisrael, which will set the profile until the end of time that Kabbalah Satorah is going to be a different level. All of a sudden, there's a gap here. There's a lapse of Shechina. He's not able to give the bracha. So he shows him what? Shows him the ksuba, shows him the shtar erisin. It should have been enough. Ubike Yosef rachmim al hadover. And Yosef had to pray. Bikesh rachmim. He asked for mercy. Midas Adin would say, having these kinds of descendants, they're not qualified to receive the bracha, to actualize their status as tribes. Bikesh Rachmim, but based on Midas Rachmim, the Nochal of Ruach HaKodesh. And then Ruach HaKodesh prophecy came back to him, and as a result of that, he was able to carry through to establish them as tribes.
Rabbi, if you
find this continuously.
Rabbi, if you
So why did the Shekhinah come back? Because Bikesh Rachmim. If not for Bikesh Rachmim, it wouldn't have happened. 1 second. Zeu shomer hakosev v'nochi galti le'Ephraim kochim al zrosav. Tergasi ruchi v'Yaakov b'shul Ephraim. Okay. 80 Yisrael Kovdu Bizokin. Again, it was still with Yisrael. Since this is determining the destiny of Klal Yisrael, this is Yisrael. This is the spiritual representation of Yaakov. His eyes were heavy from age, meaning he suffered from macular degeneration over here. Lo yuchal liros. And so he couldn't see clearly. And evidently, Ephraim and Manasseh, they resembled one another. Vayagish Osam Elov, he brought them to their grandfather, to him, Vayishak Lohem. He kissed them, Vaychabik Lohem, and he hugged them. What's this kissing and hugging? So
I
if you
would
take
say
a look
that
at this
bracha comes only when you're happy and you're joyous.
not only that, you feel attached to that person.
Uh,
That he should feel attached to them. You have to have that sense of feeling. The Yom Yisrael or Yosef. Now, again, Yisrael speaking. I never, ever considered I would see your face again. Not only did I see you, I even see your progeny. I never considered seeing your face again. But now I see your progeny. What's this, seeing your face? I never thought I'd see your face again, but now, not only did I see your face, I see your children. Last week's parsha, there was a Orach Chaim HaKodesh who explains. It says after Yaakov saw Yosef, although he was enlivened, the Nevuah came back to him before he saw Yosef when he saw the wagons. But he said to Yosef, I see your face now before I die. Before I die, I see your face. And it makes me very happy. So he explains over there, what is that the idea? So he explains, it's known that the tzaddikim, people of certain levels, they're able to see a person's life etched on his face. The face reveals a person's whole life. So knowing that Yosef is whatever he is, a tzaddik, he still remembers what he studied. But until he saw his face, he didn't know if he was compromised because of Egypt. Even though Yosef is Yosef, but you never know. He says, now that I see your face before I die, meaning I'm very satisfied now because I see you're unscathed. That's what he means. That's how Orach Chaim HaKodesh explains that pasuk. It was a known fact that Arizal, people were afraid that the Arizal were afraid to go to see the Arizal. Why? Because the Arizal, when he would look at a person's face, he could actually tell them exactly what sin they did, what mitzvah they didn't do correctly. And therefore people were afraid to go see him because everything is etched on a person's face. As we always say, panim is pinim. The face is the pinim, reveals what's within the person. It's a known fact that when they prepare a body for burial, the Chevra Kadisha, the body hovers, the neshama hovers over the body until interment in the ground. So the neshama is there when the Chevra Kadisha prepare the body for burial. And they have to cleanse the body, clean it. They dress it in shrouds and tachrichim. But they do not look, even though they clean the face, they do not gaze at the forehead of the person. Why? Because the person's whole life is etched on his forehead. Your whole life, every aspect of your life is on one's face, on the forehead. So by looking, although the people don't understand what they're looking at, but the person who's hovering over his body, the neshama, sees his whole life etched on his face. Therefore, it causes embarrassment. As a result of that, they look away. They just do it in a very cursory way. They look to the side and they clean it, and then they cover the face for that reason. So this is the idea. So here what Yaakov is saying, Ros panech lo filoti, I never believed or dreamed that to see you at your point, at your position. I see you fully intact, despite everything. But not only that, you're so intact. You see, maybe there's some kind of nuances, you miss something. But I see even your children. Your children reflect what I see on your face. Meaning, I'm not mistaken, because otherwise your children couldn't be your children. And therefore they're qualified to be tribes as Reuven and Shimon, no less than them, for that reason. Therefore, that's what he's saying. Hashem allowed me even to see your children. Yosef Osamim Birkov. Yosef took him from his father's knees. Vayishtachu lapov arzo. They prostrated themselves. Yotzi Yosef Osam Lachshin Shok Motzi Yosef in Birkov. After he kissed him today, the Yashim Zel Yamin Zel Small. That one should be on the right side, one should be on the left side. Lismo Chodav Aleim the Brocha, that he should put his hands Vishtachu lapov. After he walked away from his father, Yosef prostrated himself. What's the whole idea of prostration? We always speak prostration as negation, right? Prostration means full prostration. It's not bowing at the waist or going on your knees. It's fully. I am like dust. I am like dust. I'm nothing. A total negation. What's this idea of this negation at this point? When Eliezer went to negotiate the hand of Rivka, so initially, after they said, we will let her go. So when they said they will allow Rivka to go back to be the wife of Yitzchak, it says, Vayishtachu apay mortzah. He prostrated himself. So from Rashi over there says, why does Torah tell us he bowed? From here we learn that you have to be thankful when God does something good for you. That's the whole idea. So I mean, if I give you $1 million check to tell you, yeah, you're supposed to say thank you. The Torah's going to give me a post. It's going to write a few extra words. It's to tell us that when something happens of such special value, you have to be thankful. So that was the whole concept of prostrating himself. What does one thing have to do with another? It's understood. So the way we explained it was, we find by Bikurim that a person brings the Bikurim, which is an expression of thankfulness, boldness to Hashem for what he gave him, and these are the fruits that I'm bringing, and so on and so forth. And he makes his declaration, then he prostrates himself. And then it says, after he prostrates himself, it says, V'samachtem chol hatov. He will rejoice in all the good that Hashem gives you. That's by Bikurim. So we explained was that even though a person, you say thank you and you're appreciative, but to fully internalize that thankfulness, as long as you feel you have some value, there's some sense of entitlement. I'm entitled. It's because I did it, I negotiated, I spoke, I presented, it's me, it's I. So therefore, you don't have the thankfulness to Hashem in its fullest sense. Eliezer wanted to have that full appreciation, what Hashem provided. It had nothing to do with him. So to fully internalize what happened, he prostrated himself. To negate himself, that he should have the fullest capacity to be able to appreciate of what Hashem had done, that he succeeded in his mission. But it's not relating to him. It's what Hashem did. It's not because who he is, what he is, or any degree of entitlement. Nothing. Yosef over here, to be worthy of the bracha, because the Pasuk say he blessed Yosef. Ephraim and Manasseh were a result. He's blessing Yosef. So Yosef has to negate himself to be worthy of the bracha, to be appreciative that there's no trace of gaiva in himself, that he should be worthy of the bracha. That's the whole idea of negation at this point. Okay.
Who is Yosef negating himself to?